Hello and welcome to the Imperial Truth, episode 104. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
Not bad, you?
Yeah, getting there. It's that time of the year, isn't it? It's that time of the year.
It is, unfortunately. We're in that time of year where there's lots of going out and doing things.
Yeah, and lots of rushing around and shopping and not necessarily being where you actually want to be because there's a family member or something to do or what have you. But yeah,
exactly,
it's all part of the thing. It'll be worth it when we have a bit of time off after Christmas and hopefully some new toys.
Yay!
Yeah, I'll certainly try and make time to play with the toys I bought for myself anyway. Maybe that's the option. But it's all good. Speaking of toys, let's talk about Element Games. Excellent service, all the stuff you need. I talked about purchasing an Artis Opus brush, which I've been using. You were kind enough, you sent me a couple more, didn't you?
Yes, just to sort of get you going.
Yeah, I've actually been using the number one I've only used the 2 and the 1 pretty much for everything, and I've only started using the 1 today actually for a couple of more refined bits. I find the tips pretty damn good. In fact, the first...
Yeah, I mean, I use the 0 virtually for everything at the moment. It's literally my go-to.
Yeah, there's a slightly different approach to painting.
We do paint differently. Yes, there is that. But I just find the tips that are just so good that you can literally do. With a larger brush, you can achieve so much with a larger brush because the tip is so fine. You don't have to think, right, I now need to drop down the brush numbers because I'm coming to a fine detailed bit. You can just keep working with that brush.
Absolutely. In fact, the first brush I got had some errant hairs on it, and I followed your advice. I asked you, I was like, yep, wash it first and all this. And I'm like, I've tried all this. I've tried licking it. I've tried making a point of it. And it just wasn't happening. And I sent a photo to Element with an email on it, and they sent one out straight away to replace it, which is really good.
I think the other one key factor as well with the Artis Opus brushes is the customer service is tip top.
Yeah.
Whereas your other brush companies that like your sort of your Wins and Newton things like that, I don't think you'd get the same response.
No.
from from them.
I mean, to be fair, we've heard things about Wins and Newton. I've heard their quality is not as good as it used to be as well. Just stories, people talking. So that's take that for what it's worth.
I've had first-hand experience of that. So I mean.
The one thing that Artis Opus sold themselves on was quality. So if you're going to release a brand new product into a market where there are already these products with names, and you send out a brush that isn't up to your quality, then you kind of have to step in and do something about it. Because if that's your your USP, then it brings down the whole brand, doesn't it? So it's good to see them doing that.
Completely.
Using them, you can get them through Element. And I was actually quite surprised. So I went on Element the other day because I've been looking at... So we got all the new GW releases. We're going to talk about a couple of them a little bit later. But I was looking for third party. So I'm doing my Sisters of Silence that I've got sitting around. And I want some grenade launchers because they don't have grenade launchers as options, or I purchased them, models that have come just with bolt guns and that kind of thing. And so I actually might want some different flamers as well. And there are various companies that do, third-party parts. And I was actually quite surprised to see the range of like Cromlech stuff that's on Element and these other companies.
Oh, right, yes, yeah.
And it's just one of those things where I just got so used to not looking at them that it was, you go onto their website and yes, you've got Mantic, Mesa, Prodos, Skybore, Night Miniatures, Hawk War Games, Cromlech, and there is a list of stuff there as well. So I'm going to be putting some orders in. Obviously, they might not carry the same kind of stock. It might be more of an order-in policy, but I'm going to be picking up some grenade launchers. I think the Cromlech ones. I'm going to have a try with them.
I've noticed quite a lot of companies online now doing conversion bits, and I can't remember the names of the companies off the top of my head.
Well, it's something we'll talk about.
There seems to be a lot of people now sort of trying to cater for that well, if you want that blade of perdition, we will make you. There's a special one here that you can put on your model, which I think is cool. Yeah, I do like all of that.
There's been quite a few around for a while. I think they've come more into prominence, and particularly within the heresy, where we've had these big gaps for a period of time, or we've had stuff that's been removed from sale. Then that they can step up in their prominence within the heresy because they can provide a method. They're small enough that they can justify having these ranges in, or they print to order, or what have you, that they can do that, and that's really cool.
Yes,
and that's really useful. Some have been around for a long time. People have all talked about Spartanaax for a long time. Skyball have been putting out some Custodes-esque miniatures. The alternative Primarchs have been around for a while. I'm not a massive fan of them personally, but they've been around as an option, and options is what it's all about. But yeah, Anvil and Cromlech, and we'll talk about a few of them. And in fact, on the Facebook page, I put the question out there, and Twitter as well, of what third-party bits do you use? It was like, I just kind of had this, because I'd found what I wanted here, but it was like, actually, is there like a company with one bit which is like, if you ever need this, like this company do the best one, or before you go about building your tank, go here first and get these bits because they make it so much cooler. And there were a few names that popped up again and again. So but you can find a few of them through Element as well. So, and sometimes that makes things a lot easier with shipping. Also means you can add them onto your order to reach the threshold for free shipping and stuff like that as well.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the other great thing, isn't it? Little bits and pieces like that can be great. If you can buy an odd little bit like that maybe you can go to one place to get all the bits you need. Like, I need a couple of paints, and I want that new GW set, and I actually want that conversion bit. And, suddenly then you've put together that order and you qualify for the free shipping. Yeah,
absolutely. And, it's great. Element of the way we do a sponsorship is we kind of rotate it every 6 months, and they've just jumped on for another 6 months. And it's good to see. It's always cool to see people using the code. I get to see that information if I log on, which is it's really great to see. And they've given us a £10 Element voucher to give away. So we're going to do that at the end of the show. There'll be a competition for £10 Element voucher. So again, obviously, it's going to be much more useful if you're this side of the pond than if you're the other side of the pond. So that yes, can't be helped. Yeah. That is what that is. But we will have another competition at the end of the show anyway. So I'm going to put 2 in, seeing as it's the Christmas episode. But all that's done. What have you been up to, Neil?
Not a huge amount. I've been doing just a bit of, general casual evening painting. For basic stuff, looking at my entry for Crystal Brush next year, the Dark Elder guy on the bridge, and just been mucking about with that really. Decided to remake the bridge because I wasn't happy with. Well, what actually happened was I thought there's different stages that the bridge needed to go through, and one of them was I needed to cut all of the sections, into slabs.
Sure.
Then when I did that the first time round, one of them, I cut it by eye with a big saw.
Right.
And then when I put them back together, I went, that one's wonky. The cut wasn't straight. And when I put it together, I thought, is it noticeable? Because you could see, obviously, you look at either side and you couldn't tell really that they weren't parallel.
Yeah.
But then the more I looked at it, the more I thought, I know it's there. So I thought, okay, I'll just quickly redo it. So I built another bridge out of the model board stuff, and quickly then thought, I'll cut it, and I did the same thing again and cut it wonky. So I thought, right, this is really, really annoying me now. So I then went onto the computer and drew out on Illustrator. Effectively a line drawing, but obviously you can control it a bit more, being on the computer, and got all the proportions right. Printed that out, cut the model board to the right size, and basically have going back to that template to make sure that all the cuts are in the right place.
Yeah.
So I'm now on the third version of the bridge, but it's all been done as accurately as possible this time.
Sure.
So I haven't got these ghastly sort of like, wonky lines, etc. So
Yeah.
I'm just rebuilding that at the moment, just sticking milliput all over it just to make the curves.
Yeah.
And that's about it really. Just been mucking about with that, mucking about on the computer really.
That would annoy me at my level, but when you're entering a competition, that's the kind of detail that needs to be.
Well, yeah, and that was my thought process, because when I did the first one and it was a bit wonky, I went, no one will know. And I keep having to tell myself, no, the judges might know, and they probably will see it and go, oh, look, that isn't equidistant to that side. And then suddenly that's a massive markdown, isn't it? If you spot a big ghastly error like that. So I thought, no, redo it. And I've been doing that all over the model as well. I've been spotting little bits and pieces that at the time I thought, do you know what, that's all right as it is. And then thinking, no, redo it, scrub off the paint.
It's one of those things.
Rework the colours. You
could get away with it, right? And it might not be an issue. But, if they see it, it's like, well, it's definitely going to be an issue. So why take the risk? It's like,
exactly.
It's like playing football
it's
when
the risk
someone,
factor. It's not worth the risk.
Someone puts their hands on someone playing football in the penalty area, and a penalty's given. You can't blame anyone but yourself for putting your hands on someone. It's like you shouldn't be doing it. So just don't give them the opportunity.
You can say, I didn't think I was going to get caught, or I didn't think they give a penalty, but ultimately,
don't give them the opportunity to punish you for something that you've got control over. Yeah, and that's and it's sensible to do, especially when you're travelling that far. I know you said that you're not like as focused as kind of outright out for the competition, but you still want to do as well as you can.
Well, ultimately, I want to take my best stuff because of the distance that I'm going. If it was where we were in, like the previous one we had all the mini demons, I would be like, it's whack out an entry. If there's a few minor flaws on it, it doesn't really matter, because the next competition's coming around in 3 months' time. Whereas this is I wouldn't say once in a lifetime, because I would like to go back at some stage, but it's one of those sort of big events that you're not going to go. I probably won't go every year. I mean, I'll be amazed if I go next year. It might be like every other year if I'm lucky. And you think, when you start thinking about it in those terms, like, well, I won't go again for 2 years. You really want to put your best foot forward, don't you? You want to make sure that you've done your absolute level best. So that's what I'm working towards. I've got this to do. I've got I bought a Cult of Paint bust to do as well. The Anna bust, which is amazing, I must say. The sculpt on the sculpt and the casting is brilliant. Really, really happy with that. And I've never painted a bust, so I'm quite excited about painting something a bit of a different scale.
Sure.
And seeing how that all. I mean, to me, it's like painting a dreadnought in some ways. The sort of size, but obviously you're painting details, different types of details. I can see the fingernails on the model. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to have to paint fingernails, all that sort of stuff that I wouldn't normally have to think about. So that's going to be interesting as well. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing what it's like over there, seeing people that I've never met before, because obviously there'll be loads of Americans, I'd imagine, over there to talk to, and just really looking forward to sort of just absorbing the event and having fun, really.
Yeah, or people from all over the world. Carl Painter going over, or certainly Andy's going over. Richard Gray's going
Andy
over.
and Rich are going over.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of people from a lot of different places all competing, which is cool. Yeah, really looking forward to that. I'm still hoping to get my Talons list for gaming. I've been cracking out the sisters, been a little bit better.
You got to an event, to one of the gaming events, didn't you?
I'm playing Zone Mortalis and Centurion for Heresy. Not a huge amount. Cool. I could try and expand that when I'm there, maybe. But yeah, trying to get a Talons army. I'm doing some sisters. I put some bad photos up. I'll try and get some better photos up. They're very much in the get it done kind of thing. I think they look all right. They're simple to do. And we're cracking on with them. Quite glad just to sit down and get to be regular with my hobby. To go, actually, no, I won't. I played a bit of PlayStation this week. I won't play anymore. I'll go and hobby, that kind of thing, even if it's 40 minutes or what have you. And the sisters don't take a huge amount of time for me, which is still probably a week, broken up, but that's fine. Yeah, and hopefully Christmas and New Year I might get a little bit of time to have a few good sessions. in, and also kind of
it's all about that. It's all about that hour or two a day, isn't it? That if you can get that in, it all starts to come right.
And it can't always, but just to plug away when you can. And also, so I'm not a painter. I don't sit to paint purely for the joy of painting. But what it does do is it immerses you into that world in a way, in a hobby world. I put Netflix on, and at the moment it's things like documentaries, true crime things are quite good sometimes because they're quite audio rather than visual. And
yes,
and the computer will be on in the background, and maybe there's some podcast chat going on or something keeping me immersed. And I'm one of these people who I escape fully, so I forget the real world when I'm doing something like this, much to my wife's annoyance, that I do switch off from the real world when I'm doing it. And with some of the stuff we've had going on recently, that's been a help. I'm going to be, some people may have noticed, I knew my job was coming to an end at some point. It's coming to an end. So I'm going to be looking for a new job. Fingers crossed it won't affect the podcast a huge amount. There might be the odd thing. I've been, apart from this episode, which is late, and the last episode got late, but it's only been a day on the last couple. There is a chance if I get a new job that it does affect the podcast a little bit. I'm going to try and make sure it doesn't. In some ways, it might be easier because I might have more time in the evening because I won't have to get up so early, but we'll have to see what jobs occur. So, but the ability to come here, sit down, put something on, listen to it, crack out some paints, think about armies has been a real blessing.
I find it does give me, if I sit down to paint, and obviously I'm doing it because I really want to paint, I just get this zone out. I get this sort of where I literally, it relaxes me, and it just it almost stops me thinking about other things. I think that's what it is, where I focus on that next blend, that next edge,
sure.
Whatever that, what colours I'm using next. I think it sort of switches my brain off thinking about other stuff. So I'm just sort of in that frame of mind where I do relax more because,
and for me,
I'm not thinking about all that other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, for me, that happens when I play football or cricket, or when I'm playing the game. I do just switch off. It's a hard switch off. And for 5 hours or whatever, I won't think about life. So it's not like it's a complete kind of it's a complete block off, and it doesn't solve anything, but it does give me that time to just be, for however long, to be more relaxed. Which is good. Some people get, in fact, we shared a video on the Facebook, I don't know if you saw it, of there's a charity that for veterans in the middle of the country somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and they build airfix kits. They have an open session and people come along.
I think I saw that.
And they build airfix kits and they talk, and they're all veterans, army vets, so they obviously talk about things that affect them with people who understand that, and they use it as a form of therapy. What I don't go to that level because I cut myself off, as I say, but it does give me that kind of relaxed time, which everyone needs. And to be fair, I probably do get more of that than a lot of people, so I can't complain too much. But the sisters have been helping me there. I'm looking around at stuff. Selling a lot of stuff at the moment, mainly Warhammer and 40k stuff that I'm just looking at thinking I'm never going to get around to that. A, I own too much stuff. B, the money could be useful. So it's amazing what you can do if you're, and currently at the work, particularly now we know it's going, I'm going to make the most of my time at work by trying to earn money other ways. To actually break down items and sell them on eBay piece by piece, which is a pain in the rear, but it makes a whatever you get £5 for, you get £15 for, even if you still have to chuck some bits away.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on at the moment as well. So that's taking up some time. But I've got a lot of old Warhammer stuff for sale if people are interested. It's amazing what you pick up over the years. And luckily, I knew that I knew, as I say, I knew the job was coming to an end. So the last year or two, I've been okay with spending on stuff that I knew I wouldn't get around to. It's like, yes, I will buy that Mastodon because I have the money for it now. So I will spend the money.
Yes.
You know, and we're in a good position. I'm not overly concerned beyond the stress of looking for a job. So we're cool in that respect. So I know that all my heresy stuff here, I've got a lot to get on with. Starting January 2019, I'm going to be trying to restrain myself from spending so much on the hobby, which, you know, it's completely normal, to be fair. I've been very lucky and I could spend a fair amount.
Forge would have listened to your call and made sure that they're just not releasing anything.
Well, you say that. You say that. It's going to be like, we're going to get a black book within the first 2 months.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest problem.
Yeah, so I'm going to a weekender, which is always a fun one. So yeah, there's always but if you're in this hobby, there's always something you want to do. There's always something you want to buy. You just have to be more kind of controlled than I have been. That's all. And it's not easy. And in fact, I went to purchase hobby supplies the other day, and I ended up spending £27 on paints and things like that I needed. And I'm like,
very easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think actually, £30 a month is, like, for a lot of people, that's a not unreasonable hobby limit they have. And I've been lucky in that I've been able to stretch that, go more than that. But people do it, and you get savvy with things. You know, you do look at. And we've always. I mean, I'm not sitting here. I don't go out and buy Titans. I've never had that kind of money, or actually the desire really, because I wouldn't use them. But I wouldn't go out and drop that money on a Titan. I wouldn't go out and get, you know, a fleet of jet bikes all in one go from Forge World, because it's a large sum of money to put into something. But, you know, we talked before, you can build up armies over time by having a budget, sticking to that budget, you know, working out what you're doing and doing it in a methodical manner, looking around potentially for the good deals, whether they come from Facebook, you know, trading groups, or eBay, or whether they come from third-party bits, or just utilising all the plastics you've got available to build heresy stuff with.
Totally, yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of options there. So, you know, it's cool. And I hope that doesn't sound that I really just, as I was speaking at the end, I was really worried that last segment sounded a bit kind of like, woe is me. It's not. It's cool. It's just change, and change is bad. You know, we generally...
And from now on, the podcast will be Patreon only. £50 episode.
Yeah, quick way to not get any money. Yeah, absolutely. The podcast is not changing at all. Don't worry about that. But, you know, you've got to be more sensible, haven't you? At the end of the day.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I see loads of hobbyists out there that I think, you know, they have huge armies, and, you know, there was this one guy that always used to be in Games Workshop, and he didn't work. He was on some sort of disability living allowance, like he'd never had a job in his life. Yet he had so much GW stuff. Like, you know, he was just like the king of budgeting. You know, so like if something came out, he just knew like what he could afford to buy, and, you know, spending a little bit amount on it each week, he just amassed huge amounts of stuff. But it was all just like, you know, careful purchasing. Yeah,
and it's what means, you know, I have other hobbies I do as well. Luckily, they're not too expensive, although, you know, if you want to go and watch a football match, which I don't do very often because it's, you know, to go to the Arsenal, I'm going to pay, you know, I don't know, 100 and some odd pounds for the whole day to get up there to eat, to do. Yeah. And I sit there and think, I'd love to do it. I would love to go and watch more Arsenal games, but I'd rather spend that money in a different way. That's all it is. That's all it is. So, yeah, and we crack on. And we plug away. It's all. And I look at my shelf of models, and I'm like, there is a lot of painting. The speed I paint, there's a lot of painting. I don't need to buy models for a while. That's not going to stop me buying models, but I don't need to.
Yeah, that's the key thing, isn't it? It's completely the key thing.
Yeah, and also, I looked at I've got quite a lot of Demons of Khorne that I used to use in Warhammer, and they need to be rebased onto rounds anyway, and they would need to be expanded because it's a lot of bloodletters and not a huge amount else and things like that. But as we said, we've got that black book coming. There's going to be the option of utilising demons. I'm sure I'm going to be able to use all those models in a demon army. If I rebase that demon army, maybe repaint them, that's an army for 3 different gaming systems right there.
Yeah, so, and that's a great benefit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the demon range, even with the new demons that are coming out, they still look very much like the old demon range.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. And if I look at that, yes, realistically, for each game system, I would have to add to it, but I'm going to be adding a unit and 2 characters to a Warhammer army, and maybe a different unit and a couple of characters to a 40k army, and then for 30k might be different as well. But that's going to be less than buying one whole army by itself anyway, and then I'm getting the multi-use out of it. So there's lots of cool stuff to do. It'll keep me busy. I think 2019 will be the year of attempting to catch up on my projects. Well,
that is always a good thing.
Yeah,
I always look at all the mind model. I look at armies that I've tried to build and things I've started and things I've bought, and I always think, if I lost my job tomorrow and I was told, right, you've got 6 months off, what are you going to do? I was like, I've got plenty to be getting on with.
Paint like 4 models in that time, couldn't you?
Exactly, I could paint 4 whole models.
Yeah, so it's all part of the fun. Anyway, we should probably move on from all that, but that's what I'll be doing. I say, I think Adepticon's the target. There are some other events going on. Desperately trying to look at if I can get up to one of the 2 of the one-dayers. There's an event in Eastbourne, which is half-hour drive from where I live, which is the same day as one of the biggest Warhammer events in the country, which I never miss. So that's frustrating as sin. But yeah, there are other venues, there are other places. We're talking a little bit. I popped up to Spartanaax up at Coulsdon, so that's another event that will have more going. Jungles of a Car, that's only down the road when they do the local ones. There are options. Should we talk about what Forge World have or haven't been doing, or Games Workshop haven't?
Yes, let's talk about what they haven't been doing yet.
Well, we talked about Demons and Wrath and Rapture, as you said, the new stuff that's come out. It is out. Have you had a look? Have you had a look at this stuff properly?
Well, not properly. No, not in any great detail. Only really from looking at people's Instagrams and what Games Workshop.
There's only 4 new models. Effectively, there's the Fleshhounds, the character Fleshhound Karnak, the Enrapturous, I think it is. Which did we talk about it on the show?
I think we spoke about it on the last one actually, about the lady with the harp.
Yeah, and the Fiends as well. So I mean that box is going for £76 via Element on the pre-release thing. There's a lot of stuff in there. And you know what? When you were just talking about the Black Book just then, it got me thinking that actually, GW being the clever organisation that they are, I was just sitting there going, yeah, do you know what? Black Book coming out with demons in, and then 40k have got new demons coming out. No chance.
And you think they're not stupid, are they?
completely coincidence, I'm going to bet.
But sometimes you look at it, you think, well, it's good business sense, isn't it? You've got, you've got
the thing is,
demons coming out, and you've got, obviously, they'll do new 40k, and then no doubt, obviously, they'll go into Sigma, and then they can go, oh, look, Heresy Demons. It's just a fantastic way of
the box comes with
tying it all together.
The box comes with 40k and Age of Sigmar rules in it. There is no doubt that, well, the GW they're not lucky, but the way it works, 30k is a 40k expansion, or was a 40k expansion. It was. Touchy subject, don't go there. So they have that shared history. So anything they put into 30k has the potential to be dragged forth into 40k, with possibly the exception of a couple of Primarchs. Even then, not necessarily written off the table. But
Ferris, I would say, is pretty off the table.
Well, there's already been a clone. So
yeah, well, that is yes.
yeah. So
was that in the actual? Was that in the story?
yeah, there's he's been cloned. So whether the real, the real version of Ferrus, and there's another way they could potentially do Ferrus as well from the stories, which is a bit more far fetched. Either way, it wouldn't really be Ferrus, but there's almost nothing off limits that they could drag forth from 30k into 40k if they really wanted to. So they have that thing where they can link everything in and expand the player base. They're not. I'm fairly sure that the GW Prime, as it were, aren't thinking let's make this available for Heresy as well, but it allows Forge World to play off what GW are doing, and allows, more importantly, it allows us as players to drag in from different places, whichever system you're playing. So that's that's a useful marketing strategy, and one that was, of course, much stronger when we were using the same rule systems, but and something that is still potentially useful. The Primaris changes. For those who aren't aware, I mean, it looks like we've just had Calgar Primarified. I know slightly off topic, but we're going to go here, which has opened the door, which we knew the door was pretty much open anyway, but for other characters to be given the Primaris treatment. And there's been plenty of information drops recently that suggests we're going to get a second wave of Primaris very soon. In fact, Jez was talking recently, they, in designing the Primaris, or when they design anything, they have to make sure that they don't paint themselves into a hole. So they have to design larger than the scope of what they're releasing just to make sure it all works. So they've got Primaris ready to go. So that's kind of where you see people looking at actually 40k is now a threat to Heresy, because essentially I can't see them selling 40k small marines for much longer. Whether the vehicles go with them or not, do they become? Who knows? That's the fear.
The interest. Did I tell you about the conversation I had with the guy from White Dwarf about this at the open day?
Go for it.
I was talking to Dan from the White Dwarf team, and we were having a chat about Heresy, just a very brief chat, and he was talking about Primaris firing, the Marines, all that sort of stuff, and we were talking about the scale difference, and I said, and my point of view was that when I've been doing some converting recently, and I was converting up some Terminators, obviously you've got, I had a 40k Terminator kit that I was using bits from, and then I was using the Tartarus Terminators from the which is it, the Prospero box.
Yeah.
So I was mashing them together, and then I was really noticing the difference in the plastics. Obviously, the 40k ones, the detail was a lot chunkier, a lot bolder, and also the way they've been sculpted, where they were very, almost, I would say, like rubbery. Like they were bending in places that I was looking at, going, well, that looks a bit unnatural. But then you looked at the Heresy ones, and they were a bit more rigid, but they looked a bit more historical. Sure. That's the way I was looking at it. And when I spoke to the guy in the White Dwarf team, I was saying, he was saying, and there's problems with the scale. And I was going, well, there's two ways of looking at it. That yes, okay, the other Marines are going to be, the newer Marines they're bringing out are going to be bigger, but you can almost say that it's its own scale. Heresy is its own scale. It's more of a realistic scale in regards to, let's face it, most of the time it's Marines against Marines. So does it matter that they haven't made them bigger? Because, the ranges are different, but in my eyes, it made it its own thing. It made it its own scale, its own how it is.
There is that, and to be fair, there'll be an element of the fandom which likes the fact that it will be the old stuff. It will be the stuff they've grown up with. It will have that nostalgia, retro feel as it pushes forwards. There's no doubt. I don't think the term is scale. I think the term is proportion. I think, Primaris Marines are proportioned better than classic Space Marines. But either way, whatever your views on the actual scale, proportions, whatever, the worry is that as soon as 40k goes Primaris only, then the revenue streams from classic style Marines drop, and it becomes only Heresy players buying them. And is there enough? And we don't know. I'm sure there is at the moment, but that's the fear. I'm not here to kind of provoke it or anything else like that. And I don't think we're there yet with Space Marines being removed at all. I think we're a long way off that. It's something that the GW fandom won't handle very well in terms of generally the response will be extremely mixed. So it will happen over a period of time. But we kind of ended up there in a weird way. But yeah, that's all part of the fun, isn't it?
For me, when I look at the kits, I look at them in a very different way, because I look at some of the Heresy kits in almost like a much cleaner, plainer form. So like when I look at the Terminators, they look crisper, they look tidier, they look okay. They are a different proportion, but for me, they have they do feel more realistic than the 40k stuff. The 40k stuff, I can see it for me. It looks more cartoony. It looks more comic-y. Whereas I do feel as though the Heresy stuff is more real. They try and make it look a little bit more realistic. So as long as they keep the style going, and I'm sure Forge World would, then I don't really have too much of an issue. It might become an issue when you're trying to convert between the two types. But I think ultimately it's its own beast now. So we have to let it sort of become its own beast and let it go forwards.
Yeah. And there's lots of discussion to have on that, which we can have somewhere else. Moving on, we've had Forge World haven't really done a lot. Actually, tell a lie. We've had the one talk about stuff that a lot of people aren't going to buy. One of the tiles for Adeptus Titanicus, the second tile beta. These are, we won't talk about it too long. They're 80 quid each tile. Immediately, as soon as you put something like this up, that this is out from GW, you're going to have price issues, and without a shadow of a doubt, I'm not going to spend £80 on a tile in the situation I'm in. It's not going to happen. However, I want them. I really want them.
I love the tile. We've discussed this before, but I've got a load of those tiles for 30k, and I love the tiles. I think they're absolutely brilliant, and I can see them having a certain, because that's going to make your games really, really fun. And I mean, how big a board do you play on when you play at Titanic?
4x4. So
4x4.
Yeah, you need 4 tiles.
4 tiles. So that's quite good in a way as well. So you don't have to buy £320.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And this is part of the discussion, isn't it? It's the difference between price and value. I think they're really good. I think they're worth it. I don't think I can justify putting £320 down to get a tile system that is usable for one game.
Yeah. There is that. I mean, you never know in the future we could have something else you can use it with, but that is tricky, and not to mention as well that I bought all these tiles, and when we've played a few games and we've used the mats, I do love mats. I think they're fantastic because they do great. Mats. And in some ways, I do think that with my tiles, especially, I've often considered chopping the buildings out of them and using and mounting the buildings as their own buildings, so you could use those on a mat or something. Sure. So you have a little bit more flexibility, because I think the tiles are fabulous, but often there's areas of space that's roads and flat, because obviously you need that for playing on. And if you could just extract the buildings off those tiles, and actually the one you can set them up in much more unique ways, but also it means that easier to store. You've got a mat then, and also that you've got less risk of damaging your models, all of that sort of jazz.
Yeah, big time.
But then that's a very expensive way to make scenery.
It's one of those things. It's the hobby wish list is to have. Yeah, you'd still get your mats because you can pick them up for £40 to £60 depending on how big and what quality and what designs you want on them. But I would still want, the dream would be to also have a fully awesome Adeptus Titanicus table with the tiles and the buildings and everything else that comes with it. It's just one of those dreams.
It's a lottery dream, isn't it? When I win the lottery, I'm going to have a separate room. I'm going to have tables set up with all of the scenery. I'm going to have racks on the wall for all my books and all of my models and all that. But often we have to live without all of those things.
Yes, absolutely, we do. Well, that's all we've had for Heresy. We've, as I say, we're approaching Christmas. I think with the timings we've had, I think the sneak preview could be a Primark, as I think we said last episode. I think Christmas Day sneak would be cool if they...
Could be, I suppose, couldn't it? It could be they drop a Primark. When's the weekender? February, isn't it?
February, yeah. So a little tease of a Primark. Even just
I could see that working,
whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be really awesome. We've got the Black Light. I'm trying to think what else we've got. So we know we've got Titan Death in January for Adeptus Titanicus. Something else I have to buy. Great. And then the Weekender. I'm not. Hopefully, we'll get maybe another small wave of either Blood Angels or something in the build up as well. Would be cool. But I'm not expecting a huge amount in that respect. I expect like one Heresy-esque release, but I don't know quite what they'd be. It almost feels like they gave us too much that last episode when we recorded, and
it was like it did feel like there was too much.
There's loads here, so we're going to get nothing for 5 weeks. Okay, cool. But I mean, who knows? And then Black Library have said I think they've got 2 books coming out on Christmas Day, well in advance of schedule. So
cool.
I'm not 100% sure if they'll be Heresy related, because I suppose we're looking at. They could do the Buried Dagger, which is the last in the Heresy series before the Siege of Terror. But Siege of Terror is being released as the limited edition version, which they announced and showed off, and it looks glorious. I think they're doing all the books in that thing, which is both a blessing and a curse again, because I will be collecting them. So I can't see them giving away that beforehand, but we'll keep an eye on that. But we do have the Advent calendar for this year, which we've had some Heresy stories out already. Old Wounds, New Scars, which follows the character from Moloch from the Vengeful Spirit book, which is quite interesting and possibly tease things up for stories set on Terra later on. I don't know if they're going to follow that through. That's by Graham McNeil. We've had Abyssal by David Annandale, which is a horror-esque story about the Black Ships. They did have a problem with some of the audios they wanted to put out. They had issues and couldn't get them ready in time. So they've reprinted A Lesson in Iron, a Ferris story from the Primark series. And then we've had The Last Council. Have you heard anything about The Last Council?
I've heard very little about any of it, yes. So nothing. No.
So last year, or a while ago, we got Laurie's short story, which blew the world up about... I don't want to break it up too much. But essentially, Laurie Golding has a short history of kind of targeting short novels particularly, or shorter stories at some of the more kind of either tenuous or debated aspects of the law. And we've had the story about Malcador talking to someone on their deathbed and revealing potential secrets, and a lot of information where we weren't sure whether it was true information or not, and that caused quite a few ripples. And then this year, in this Advent, we've got the Last Council, which is focused on Malcador at the last Council of Terror before Horus arrives, where they dissolve it for the war. And there are kind of 3 stages to it, this story, 3 different time settings. But it involves some Primarchs and involves some really teasing moments, which are obviously designed to provoke a small reaction, which I don't have a problem with. A lot of people do have a problem with it. They think it's kind of malicious, I think, the intent. But it offers up some very tantalising kind of, depending on what way you want to read it, you can be blown away by the secrets revealed, or you can be like, oh, that's a cool little like nod to that old bit of lore without actually making it new lore, if you know what I mean.
Right, yes, I know what you mean, yeah.
So that's potentially, and there's some moments in it where Malcador shows you why he's the regent, why he's the right-hand man of the Emperor, because, you know, we have a lot of Malcador like controlling things, moving around, but he's been in the presence of the Emperor for a long time. You know, he's got a few tricks of his own. So there's some of that in there as well, which is really cool. And I think there's a couple more to come. So you can keep an eye on those. And you can buy those individually. I think it's £2.49 a story. So obviously if you want to buy all 25, that's, you know, not an inconsiderable amount of money. But at £2.49, if you only want to purchase the Horus Heresy stories, it's a lot more achievable, which is worth doing.
No, definitely.
Yes. And there we go. Before we move on, we did have, I don't know, the poll might have ended, but we've got a competition on Facebook we talked about last episode that's going through, you can vote on. So head over to Facebook and vote on that in the group. You can, there's a poll which you can take part in. And I did want to talk about, we had an email about an army list. Thomas Bourget, I'm going to pronounce that as, it's probably wrong, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. And Thomas sent me an email asking my advice about a list. He'd read No Fear, I think it was. Yeah, and he was like kind of intrigued and loved the bit where Hol Beloth is attacking a palace on Calth, which is defended by Ultramarines and PDF. And wanted to kind of make a force which represented that assault force, which is awesome. Really cool to see. And he sent me a list. We'll just go through the list he decided on. He changed it a little bit. We've got, what have we got here? We've got Hol Beloth, because he's leading it. A chaplain with, you know, all the stuff, artificer armour, additional combat blade, refractor field, power maul. We've got a Contemptor Cortis class Dreadnought Talon, 2 of them with Carries and las cannons. 10 Galvorback with various options in that. A couple of tack squads in Rhinos. A Spartan to put the Galvorback and the Chaplain and Hol Beloth in. A Storm Sword on there as well. And then a Militia Attachment Force. This is 3,000 points, by the way. Some Militia attached to it, which is a Force Commander with some toys, 3 Medicaes, and then 2 units of 50 inducted levy squads, and 3 Earthshaker cannons as a heavy support option. And then the provenance they've got is Tainted Flesh, which is the fear, the rending, and that stuff, and Alchem Jackers. So they ignore negative close combat tests, I think, when they lose combat, and if they fail a leadership test whilst being shot, they become pinned instead of fleeing. So
cool. Yes,
that did change. I will say briefly, we didn't have the Contemptors. We had 10 Assault Marines, and I think there was just a few extra little bits dotted around, rather than it was a Bane Blade rather than the whatever, what should we call it, he took beforehand, the Storm Sword. Bit of a price difference there, and he saved those points around to put the Contemptors in and bits and pieces. And the idea behind this, obviously, is to recreate that force. And I was talking to him, I think the reasons we put the Contemptor in was it's something that I've seen a lot online, people talking about, as Heresy players, we accept that you need to design your army to deal with at least one Spartan, just in case, because if you don't, that Spartan runs the table. And a lot of the options is, well, in this army, the only way to do it is metal bombs. And it's like, well, usually those metal bombs are carried by armor value 3 dudes who A, have to run to get to you or jump and run, and B, have to try and do it without getting mullered by everything on the table, which everything on the table can probably muller a load of guys in power armor. So it's
as we say, everything kills guys in power armor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said to him that this could be a problem, and that's fine. It can be. You can build a list and know that can be a problem. In some ways, he has the forces that could possibly tie up whatever gets out of those Spartans. So 50 inducted levies with essentially like probably not running away can actually do the job without having to kill the Spartan anyway. So there are options in there, and he didn't have any anti-flyer. But again, a lot of armies are built without any anti-flyer. You just like, okay, if he's got flyers, I just won't aim at them or I'll make do. So we put those in, as I say, fiddled around with it a little bit. And the other real weakness is you've got, again, his army is relying on the Spartan unit is the big unit. And that's a common thing, and that's fine. He was happy with that because this army is designed around a part of the story. I thought it was really cool, actually. I think you've got 2 HQs, neither are Humor over the top. Two Cortis Dreadnoughts. Yeah, they're cool. They're always good. 10 Galvor backer, wonderful. Two minimum units of dudes in rhinos. But I suppose you've actually got the Allied forces where you've got 2 big troop squads there. So if you are claiming, there's a good chance that you might have 1 or 2 of those guys still around that can do that job. Spartans are always good. Storm Sword, I haven't seen used a huge amount, but I'm sure it's all right. And Earthshaker cannons are fine for the points. I think they're quite cool. He's got a little bit of everything in it. But I don't think that I would ever sit down across the table from it and think, oh, I don't like that, or I'm going to run over that. Like I might think I'll beat it, but I don't think I'd run over it.
And in some ways, sometimes they're the fun armies to play.
Yeah.
Because when you look, I remember talking to someone once, and he wrote a list, and he'd written a list because he could buy certain bits from GW, and it was just literally all troops, no vehicles. And I remember looking at it going, man, if you're going to play 2,000 points with that list, you're going to get beaten every single time because you've got nothing in there that could deal with Spartans. It was just literally cannon fodder. And if you look at them like, oh man, it's just going to roll over that. And that's no fun for either side. And then also you've got to think of that, sometimes an army like that could have a few hidden surprises. Something that, you may be, that unit over there, I'm not too worried about that. Then suddenly, that unit jumps out and decimates a vehicle or, blows up one of your key units, and you think, I've got a problem now. And then suddenly it can be a bit more tactical. You maybe have to do a little bit more thinking about it.
Yeah, I think this list isn't subtle. At the end of the day, you've got 10 Galvor back in a Spartan. That's going to be coming at you.
Yes.
And sometimes that doesn't make there are times when that isn't the most fun game, but actually it's not a major issue, I don't think. I'm trying to say it becomes weird when you're talking about someone's list like this. They're obviously in there because that's what he's building his army around and fitting that narrative. I think if you've got an experienced player, they will play that. They will know how to play against that quite easily. But there's lots of instances where if you've got an experienced player, they will know how to do this. I don't think that's ever going to be a kind of thing that isn't there, really.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
That is part of that. But when you look at kind of the tenets of building an army list, he's got the ability to take out, as we said, he's got the ability to take out armor. He's got a rock hard combat unit, plus the 2 levies can cause a lot of problems in combat with 6+ for rending. You've got the heavy ordnance batteries for taking out, reducing troops. You got your tactical squads are mobile, so they can get around where you need them to do. You've got a storm sword in there which can pack a bit of a punch. I think when you talk about writing narrative lists, and this was written, narratively, it's drawn from a passage in a book. You don't kind of get that. That's kind of an example sometimes of what we talk about when we do these things. And there's lots of ways to do narrative, but that's one of the kind of highlight examples. I think he's done quite well, and it would be cool. It would be cool to play it.
Would you'd like to play against it? I take it.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think my Mechanicum would probably tear it, but then I played my Mechanicum a lot, and Mechanicum are quite good.
You know all the ins and outs of it,
and I know how to kind of deal with a Spartan without dealing with a Spartan. So even if I couldn't deal with it, I could handle it. I don't doubt it would destroy some of my stuff. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But I think we could have a fun game. That's if I took my normal Mechanicum list, obviously, because I could always reduce what I take in my Mechanicum and not take the things I normally take.
Of course, yeah, that's the good thing when you know an army so well. You know how to maybe, tone it down a notch or two when you play certain people.
Yeah, no, or certain events or certain styles of game. Because even when we went to Spartanaax, I look at the list of people who are going, and I'm like, actually, there's some good players going there. And we'll move on, I think, from Thomas's list here. I think it was really cool, and it was really cool to see him change it as well. But I went to Spartanaax a couple of weekends ago, whenever it was, early December, and I called out Colin, who has been to my events. We chat a lot, but we've never actually got to play each other, and he was using his Alpha Legion, and historically, Alpha Legion players have tended to play into the hands of my army. I've had some extremely easy games because of the way people played them, and that's fine. It's cool. In fact, I think almost every time the person playing it was more than happy to do that and enjoyed the game. But playing Colin, he had a solid kind of traditional Alpha Legion, like bits and pieces here and there. Took some Siege Tyrant Terminators, had a Leviathan walking across the board, had some I can't try to remember what taxi hold he had, an Arcus that could cause me some problems, and was bringing most of his stuff on the table edge, usual kind of stuff. But but the difference was it played it well. So when he bought stuff on the table edge, he made sure there was a Rhino blocking lots of lines of sight. So if I didn't manage to blow that Rhino up, it was preventing me from shooting at the targets I wanted to hit.
Yeah. Yeah, just knowing those little tweaks to make it,
And it turned out I didn't want to fire my weapon that would definitely probably blow the Rhino up at that, because I wanted to use it for something else. So as a result, the first turn he came in, the turn after, I didn't get a huge amount of shooting on him. And he knew to take out, like in that instance, my Ursarax were going to cause a problem. So the Ursarax got shot up, and then he tried to pick, and we had a really close game. I didn't even bother firing at the Leviathan, just because I only got like one or two weapons that could really hurt it, and one of them is my Archmagos Prime, and actually my Archmagos Prime had to go and run into units and close combat them because that was the role he needed to play. So without the kind of the ability to really punch the armor, I was like, you know what, your Leviathan's going to kill a unit every 2 turns. Cool, fine. He can crack on. I'm going to try and stop everything else killing me. And it was a fantastic game. It was good. I won. No, I didn't win comfortably at all, but I won. Weird to say it that way. There were times when the game could have swung, and I had to work hard for it. But I think I was going to win that game like once we got halfway through, I was like, okay, I should win this game, kind of thing. But
Yeah,
it's good
sort
to
of
play.
almost know that you almost take a key unit out or something, and you have that feeling of, right, okay, now I know that I've got a much better chance of winning this game.
Yeah, it was really good, really good. And always great to play Colin, and he had his little dog there, Indiana, running around as well, which was brilliant. So yeah, that was really cool. And then I got to play the Zone Mortalis, and I'd been talking to Si about Zone Mortalis and about how, because they've got one like fully Zone Mortalis table, and then he made one that was made from terrain pieces. So it was like the ship or whatever had taken damage, and you could actually see through part. Once you got close enough to the walls, you could actually like clearly see through it. So
Okay,
an
cool.
adaptation, because you don't have the Zone Mortalis board. It was an adaptation of those rules to fit in with that, and it worked really well. Actually, he did quite well doing that. And I played some World Eaters, and it's one of those games where I think he had 2 Quartus Contemptor Dreadnoughts, and I had like some Thalax, some Ursarax, my Magos Prime, and like 2 Vorax, I think. And I'm like, okay, if my Magos Prime doesn't take out these Quartus Dreadnoughts, I am stuffed. And luckily it did. And I'm like, okay, right, I've just got like the Red Butchers to worry about now, kind of thing. And I'm jumping around doing like my, jumpy moves and all this, thinking, okay, this is going to be an interesting battle. And the Ursarax and the Red Butchers can kind of slaughter themselves. And then all of a sudden his like 4-up saves on the Red Butchers were just mental. It was just like, I've made 12 out of 14 4-up saves. I was like, oh my word, I need to kill these Red Butchers. To the point where they ran through one unit, ran through another unit, and I'm eyeing them up with like some Vorax. And these 2 Vorax have charged into his unit, and his Paragon Blades not managing to get the 6. And I'm slowly whittling down these. I think it ended up with 1 Vorax on 1 wound left, I think, and his Praetor, and managed to get the hits on his Praetor to kill his Praetor. I was like, all of a sudden his rolls failed. And immediately after that turn, there was a quake on the Zone Mortalis table. And it was like, okay, so everyone takes a strength test. Every model on the table takes a strength test. And he's, and if you fail, you're dead. Sure enough, Vorax 6, dead, boom. I was like, you what? It's just sod's law. As soon as you got a monstrous creature in a situation like that, and it's like, oh yeah, oh no, he's going to die, isn't he?
He'll be fine. He's dead.
And it actually all came down to one World Eaters tactical squad. Could he get through units of Thalax? And it was, I haven't had a game like that in a while actually, where the humble tactical squad did everything it needed to do and just kept going. And I think we actually drew in the end, because I had like one Thalax ran away and the other one got slaughtered. And we were just both too far away from like objectives, and we both killed each other's HQs and stuff like that. It was cracking, but it's good to play different formats, and that's something that I'm taking on going forwards. It's great to mix it up, and it's great to get out those units and allow the beautiful things about things like Zone Mortalis and Centurion, which I haven't played enough of, to be fair, but is they allow other units to come to the fore that you don't normally see. And something I've been watching a bit of 30K channel recently as well. And when you watch those, when you watch those Zone Mortalis games, you take Iron Hands Breachers, and they're just like tanks in Zone Mortalis. They just absorb.
And yet in 30K,
they're rubbish.
Iron Hand Breachers. They're like, yeah.
Yeah, they're not rubbish, but they're by no means kind of like the optimum choice at all. But there are lots of units which kind of thrive in different formats. Talking to a couple of people, Assault Marines, all of a sudden in Centurion, Assault Marines take on a much greater role, and that's cool and that's good, and sometimes
because it means that then if when you're writing an army list, or when you're buying models, should I say, probably more, you're then those cool looking models you don't necessarily go, but why do I buy those? They're rubbish because they've only got da-da-da-da-da. Then suddenly it's like, well, no, actually, if I use those in Zone Mortalis, they're going to be absolutely brilliant.
Or if you've already bought them, it's like, oh, brilliant, I get to use these and not have them just die. That aspect of it. Yeah. So that's something that will be a focus moving forwards as well, for me and for events and things like that, getting some ideas. But yeah, and talking about units you don't normally see and being effective, the third game I played, Chris is, I met him at Eastbourne and he lives not far away from me, and he challenged me for a game, and I've got my kind of standard Mechanicum list, and he's like, oh, you're going to win, you're going to tear me apart. And I'm like, oh, what have you got? And he's like, 60 Cacophony, and then like the odd character and some rapiers, batteries with las cannons. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, what do Cacophony do? And he's like, oh, they're essentially Volkite, and then they do this. And then if you take wounds, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, didn't really listen. You know how you do sometimes?
Oh,
like,
they can be devastating.
Yeah, right. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. Oh, I'm going first, am I? Okay, well, I've got, like, because of the special rules of the event, I got a free orbital strike. I'm like, okay, so I've got 2 orbital strikes I can use first turn, and a Thanatar's template as well. Okay, well, I'll try and take out some of these rapiers so he can't take my big creatures down, because he'll wear them down over time. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, fair.
And, some scatters and some not great rolls, and you're never going to crush rapiers that quickly either. And I'm like, okay, I've done a bit of damage. It didn't go quite as well as I wanted, but we'll see. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to move forward with everything, and I'm going to open up on your Ursarax. And I'm, okay, loads of shots with Volkite, and with his Cacophony, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to fail a few of these. Okay, killed 2 or 3 models. Oh, that's not good. Well, we'll see if we can do anything with them. And he's shot some other bits and pieces. He's like, right, so, and then leadership test for that unit, minus the 9 wounds I did, or whatever, 6 wounds I did. I'm like, what? I obviously didn't listen to that properly. Okay, well, I'm going to fail that, aren't I? Okay, cool. And he's like, and then just D6 models die. I'm like, what? You what? And my Ursarax are dead. And I'm like, oh, I should have targeted Cacophony. Okay. Right. And he's like, he'd spent 10 minutes. The best bit was he goes, oh yeah, not very good against Mechanicum because you've got loads of Fearless. And I'm like, no, I've got like 2 units that are Fearless. 3 maybe. And I'm like, oh, my Ursarax like do a lot of stuff. And do you know what the worst thing is? The Ursarax had just got the ability where I could run and charge with them. And I forgot. And there was potential. Whether it would happen or not, I would have to have rolled probably a half decent either run or charge or both to get in. But there was a chance they could have got into the Rapier Crews and maybe tagged a Cacophony unit. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was my last, because you had character points which you could use for your army. I didn't use one in all 3 of my games. It never came to fruition. Any of them just weren't either useful or then I forgot. I was like, oh, great, okay. And then I'm like, I think you're going to win, Chris. And he's like, no, I won't win. No, I won't win. And I start slowly trying to take out all these Cacophony, or just firing I better make sure I fire a photon thruster at each unit I can, just to see if I blind any, so they're much less useful. And just slowly whittled me away. I'm like, well, if he shoots my Thalax, they're dead. Like, 1 unit will kill all my Thalax because of that rule. I'm like, this is bad.
That rule can be so powerful. I mean, I remember in the first iteration that they made of the rule, it was like really sort of like, meh. And then they rejazzed it and made it really useful.
I think maybe in my head I was thinking, Cacophony aren't very good, without thinking about it. And I didn't help myself. The table was a little bit funny. I probably chose the wrong deployment, and it slowed me down a little bit getting out. But by the end, I think we finished on turn 5 or something. There was one charge where my Thalax had to hold, and they didn't. And that would have been a draw if they had. But actually, by the end of the game, because I was then focusing, actually, yes, his rapiers, it's quite funny. Whenever anyone sees the Thanatar, they're like, well, there's no point firing at that. And I'm like, I mean, there is. and I've had this so many times, and actually he took it down in 2 turns of shooting. But, on averages, it's about a turn and a half's worth of shooting from the stuff that he should be shooting at it, which means that you only need a little bit of luck to take it down in 1 turn, and a little bit of bad luck, and it still takes 2 turns. But if you are worried about that template coming down, or even it getting into combat, then it's worth it. There are times, don't get me wrong, there are times it's not worth it. There are absolutely times it's not worth it. But he got a bit kind of flustered in that, but then killed it anyway. And I mean, the beauty of Cacophony is the amount of shots you can put out as well. So typically my Warlord died just to rolling enough ones. It happens. It just happens. And I'd got him down to like 1 unit had 4 left, 1 unit had 3 left. He only had I think he had 4 units left, but probably 12 or 14 maximum Cacophony left on the table, and some rapier batteries, and a couple of apothecaries here and there. But yeah, that was an eye-opening game for something I don't normally play. I can see the problem with the army.
They're always the ones that catch you out. I mean, I remember the first time. Might have been the first time I played Emperor's Children. I remember, those little special units. Sometimes they go under the radar.
Yeah.
And then when you say, what do they do? They say, just as they go, okay. And then you see them use them to their best effect.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh.
And I'm sure,
that's what they do.
If you've got a unit of Terminators with an apothecary attached to them, yeah, they're probably not going to be doing a great deal. Or as he says, any fearless unit, and they lose some effect. They still pump out a lot of shots, but they're not going to be anywhere near as effective as they are, you're just going to put wounds on Thalax and Ursarax. You're just going to put so many wounds on them, it's not going to matter. And even the bigger stuff, there's a lot of attacks, and I don't have a lot of units, so they're quite useful in that. Obviously, if you're not getting those special rules into effect because you're not getting the wounds through, or they're making their saves, or they're fearless, then yeah, I can see it being an army that gets sweeped every now and then. Absolutely. Or vehicles, if you can't bring down the vehicles quick enough, then yes, the Cacophony can kind of whittle some vehicles down, but it's unreliable, and the heavy stuff's going to ignore it. But it was different. It was interesting to see, and it was good fun. Every now and then you need those games which are way out of left field to play.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And again, that's the kind of thing where, in a different style, maybe not quite as many, but they could come really to the fore when potentially things like sometimes people are relying on special characters for Fearless, things like that can have an effect when they're not available, and all that kind of jazz. But it was a really good game. It was a really good fun event. There were every table had like its set rules for it, and there were some tables had different missions, and some tables were controlled depending on how the event was going on. There was a list of army bonuses you could earn through the weekend, which I think was taken from their 2-day event and used in this one. So there was a lot that you wouldn't be able to afford because you couldn't accrue those points. There was a lot I couldn't use because they were infantry squads rather than jetpack infantry, which is understandable because the ability to jetpack, run and charge once a game is fine. The ability to do that more than that, or other rules that were in there potentially were a little bit unfair. So it was good that they weren't allowed on infantry. But my one infantry squad was my 20 plus wounds for my HQ that don't do anything. So I wasn't going to give them too many special rules. But yeah. As I say, Mix is own Mortalis. The venue they use is has its own charm, I think, is the terminology. It's not a postcard kind of venue, but it's serviceable. Great kind of, I had a whacking barbecue, really tasty food. I want to go back, actually. I'm gutted I missed the last one.
And they didn't set the barbecue alight, did they?
They didn't burn anything, no. They had a little tuck shop.
Like the last time, I believe they whacked it on full gas, shut the lid and set the barbecue alight.
Yes, they got a bit overzealous with that. Little kind of meeting area, and it's only, 50-minute drive, 50-minute, an hour drive from me as well. So it's like brilliant. Simon put on more events. And I know the Sons of Heresy guys, Brendan and Jason were there, and they talked a little bit about theirs. I don't want to get too much into it. The packs, you could probably find the pack still up, and Si's doing some interesting things with his next event. He's being really restrictive on what you can bring. I like the idea of what he's trying to do in, as I say, mixing up, and I think that might be a theme this year for Heresy events, to play around with the different restrictions. And just as long as we still get some of those events where we still have, allow everything or what have you, that's good, because again, it breathes life into the gaming system. Yeah, but that's it. That's
cool.
A lot of chat. Should we leave that there? We'll come back. We'll talk. We'll have the interview with John French, and then we'll close out the show afterwards. I'd like to welcome Mr. John French to the show again. Hi, John.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm here again.
Indeed, back by yourself again. We'll be working on Aaron. Don't you worry about that. But we've got you on as part of the series we're doing, having written now some novels and plenty of shorts within the Heresy.
Yeah.
I think we should start right at the beginning. So some people might not be aware, but you did work for Forge World, and you did write on those first few Black books.
Yes. So actually, I started writing for Black Library first.
Okay.
I'd done my first work for the Heresy actually for Black Library first. I wrote a short story called The Last Remembrancer in the Age of Darkness anthology.
Yeah.
I think came out in 2011 or some other hideously long time ago. And after that, I wrote a novella called The Crimson Fist, which is about the Battle of Farl and the Imperial Fists being ambushed by, being becalmed, and then their fleet being ambushed by the Iron Warriors. And I think I'd then also done a book called, not a book, an audio drama called Grey Angel. And before the Black books from Forge World started coming. So I was fairly unique in that I'd started down the Heresy line on the Heresy team broadly, Black Library, but then also because I'd worked with Alan Bligh, the late Alan Bligh, an awful lot on the 40k roleplay games like Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, Death Watch, and I was already writing Heresy stuff for Black Library. I had the chance to come in on the early Black books, on the first three really, did a chunk of work for them. Wrote a few Legion backgrounds, and did the campaign design in the first book, and. I think the last bit of stuff that I did for them was the background Legion write for Thousand Suns in Inferno.
Sure. Oh wow, cool. So it's been a while since those books happened, so the timing was a little bit out of my head on that one. We can't really talk about the Black books. That's what it is. Unfortunately, a whole different sphere to talk about. But so there's a wealth of knowledge. Obviously, anyone who writes for Black Library's got to understand the setting anyway. But I can imagine working with Alan, that only got a deeper understanding and all the access you had there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how did you get that first ask to do The Last Remembrancer?
I didn't actually. Okay. I was incredibly cheeky. I was a new, very, very green Black Library writer with I think 2 other credits to my name, both short stories for Black Library. And I was talking with my editor at the time, and our conversation drifted into talking about the heresy, and he said something about, we're going to have to figure out what to do with the remembrances.
Sure.
Because, of course, by that point, they were just moving into the Age of Darkness, which was the point past all of the initial ambushes and sort of set-piece attacks that Horus had set up at Calth and Farl and Istvan, and not really an age where you could have remembrances just washing around and looking at things. And it occurred to me, it was really, really rare. This doesn't happen often, certainly to me, and I don't think it happens very often to most other writers. But the idea for the Last Remembrance arrived almost just fully formed, kind of like a lightning bolt in my head. And I said, when I next met my editor, I said, I've been thinking about what you said about, you've got to figure out what happened to the remembrances. And I've got an idea. And I told them what the idea was, and very kindly they said, okay then, no promises, but write it and we'll have a look at it. And I wrote it, and they had a look at it, and they went, we're going to publish it, which we're going to publish it in the next anthology. And that blew my head off, really. I was very, very very, very surprised and very, very chuffed. For our American listeners out there, chuffed, overjoyed.
Absolutely. It's a very polite way of saying excited.
But yeah, normally that's not the typical way of doing things.
Sure.
I will a library writer at that point, but I had written like a novel and a half for other people and spent about 4 or 5 years writing role-playing games before then. So I was new to Black Library, but I wasn't necessarily a completely green writer at that point.
Sure. So you've written that first book. I'm assuming. Well, I don't know. Was there any interaction with the other writers while you were doing that, or was that your own kind of piece?
No, that was I was a huge fan, and I'm still a huge fan of all of the Horus Heresy stories. I still read them all, and I had read them all at that point. And so I knew absolutely what was in all of those stories, what had been written. And I think it was around the time that the last book that I'd read just before then was The First Heretic. And that was the kind of period, and the idea for it and the tone and the feel for it, I tried to get as close as possible to what was going on with the rest of the story at the time. But yeah, no, that was a bit of a solo piece of work, which existed really only for that kind of story. Everything else after that, especially when you get into like the longer bits of work, like novellas, and then definitely novels or longer bits of work, there's much more involvement. You'll be talking to at least one of the other authors, or sometimes all of them, about what you're doing and where it's going.
Cool. So you've handed this piece in, Last Remembrance, and they've said they're going to print it. Was there a kind of a reception then to get you into more, or did you?
I had to wait a bit, to be honest. I went and did some other stuff for Black Library, some other 40k titles, and a bit of other work. And it takes a bit of time to build. It takes a bit of time to build your skill and your kind of trust with editors. I wrote back then at about 1/3 of the speed that I do now.
Sure.
So you literally get faster, and what you write tends to be more what Black Library want with practice. So there was a bit of a wait because I was doing some other stuff, and that took quite a long time. And then they asked me to do Crimson Fist, or rather, it was put to me of we've got to cover the battle for Farl. It's not going to go into a main novel, we don't think, and we really want to have a story that also explains why at the end of Flight of the Eisenstein, Rogel Dawn sends Sigismund off with the Retribution fleet to Istvan, but then Sigismund is on Terra in the solar system in these other books. So what happened there? And those appearances should be happening at about the same time as Farl. So there's a story to be told there because Sigismund was sent with the Retribution fleet that then gets becalmed at Farl, but isn't with it, clearly. So what's going on there? So I was kind of given that as a bag of subject matter and stuff to think about, and I came up with the idea for Crimson Fist and how that all worked together, and talked a lot with my editor at that point. Also had quite a lot of conversation with Graham McNeil at the time,
right?
And he sort of, I suppose, mentored me through, especially the Iron Warriors part of that book, and because I was trying very much to follow his guidance on them for what as a setup to what would be Angel Exterminatus.
Okay, right, I'll jump on a couple of bits there. So obviously Imperial Fists and Iron Warriors, and you've gone on to do some kind of key Imperial Fist moments. Was there a love of the fists before this, or was this taking advantage of the opportunities that came?
I really like writing about Rogel Dawn, and by extension Imperial Fists. I knew the Legion beforehand, and so yeah, I really do like the Imperial Fist. But in particular, what I mean by that is I really enjoy writing stories about them because of what Rogel Dawn is like and what the Legion's like. They're just so much fun to write about because they've got this massive drive towards self-sacrifice to a ridiculous extent. They'll bear any weight, take any punishment, pay any price, and that's a really compelling thing to write about. You can really get your teeth into that. And Rogel Dawn is a deeply conflicted character. He's an idealist and is supremely stoical. He will just shut down and take on more and more weight and just brace into it more and more and more. But under the surface, he is he is an idealist that believes in things and wants things to be better, and the sacrifices he has to make tear him apart. But the more he gets teared apart, the more stoical he gets about it, and the less he responds to it, and the more he tries to shut it down. And that's just a really interesting character to think about and write.
Yeah, I can't say I love him, and probably never will. But yeah,
most of the characters that are actually most interesting to read about and write, in my experience, are not the ones that you'd actually like.
Yeah, definitely true, definitely true. And on the flip side of that, you've written about the Iron Warriors a number of times, and from a number of different perspectives as well. How do you find the Iron Warriors? Obviously, listening to you there, talking to Graham Neal and getting his viewpoints. That's an interesting thing. Having read little bits online about the way people have viewed your Iron Warriors stories, for good and ill.
That's an interesting question. I think I see the Iron Warriors very much as everyone in the heresy has a point from a certain point of view, traitors and loyalists, and the kind of point warriors that they were sent to do the dirty jobs that no one else would do, and that they weren't rewarded from it, and it was just expected that they would do it, and they would carry on doing it, and they weren't seen as, no matter how effective they were never seen as, for want of a better word, glamorous or anything like that. They've got a point. They have got a point. They are, they spill their blood, and they are willing to, and they're willing to do that, and to stand to the last, and break the enemy's defences, and do all these things almost without question. But that doesn't seem to get them anything in their eyes. They've got a point. They have got a point. But I think that's obviously also a weakness. That's what Chaos does. Chaos, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about the Iron Warriors that I try and get through in, especially stuff like Talon, the Talon stories, and more recently sort of Slaves to Darkness, where you get to see quite a lot of them and quite a lot of Perturabo and how they've started to change, is that Chaos goes into those kind of flaws and then kind of pulls them apart and magnifies them and finds a way that those feelings and flaws and in their character can be expressed. And yeah, they kind of always did want to be builders. They are very, they didn't want to be down in the mud, smashing things, but that's the job they were given, and they're very, very good at it. And Chaos just starts leaning into that, and also their incredible drive to not be weak.
Yeah.
So that and you've always got to wonder with the character of any individual or any legion or any group that's, a legion is kind of like, they've got a big overlap of character because of their genetic heritage. You got to look at them and kind of wonder if they're so obsessed about being strong and not being weak. That means they're actually kind of afraid of being weak.
Yeah.
And Chaos just goes, okay, fine. We can sort that out for you. And it doesn't do it literally like that quite often. It does it in more insidious ways. And it sort of creeps in till eventually they've fallen an awful long way down. And I think one of the biggest expressions of that is obviously Perturabo, who you see literally physically and psychologically changing throughout the books. But also, for those that have read Slaves to Darkness, the most recent book, the character of Volk, who's also in Talon, is kind of the beginning of part of the expression of that and what happens to him. No spoilers, is almost the direct result of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Just in doing a little bit of research for this, I've seen some quite... And you're never going to please everyone, and that's fine. There's some people kind of putting your Iron Warriors work at a very different place to Graham's, which I found quite surprising personally. Having reading Angel Exterminatus and then the Talon stuff was the first time I'd ever felt any positive feelings towards the Iron Warriors, to the point where I started to want to build an army because, as you say, I mean, yeah, their strength is their flaw. They wear that. They wear that we do the dirty work as a self-pitying rag they have around themselves the whole time, but that they show they have a point. And I found it very interesting just reading someone else's kind of view on that, because I actually thought they're obviously different. Your writing and Graham writing are never going to be the same. It's impossible. I thought they were very similar kind of point of view, if you will, of the Legion.
I mean, they're the Iron Warriors, and if you look at Angel Exterminatus with the betrayal of Perturabo by Fulgrim, and then Perturabo is sort of starting to be sort of full exposure to how far his brothers have fallen, and what Chaos is doing to them. His response to that is what he does in Talon, really, which he goes and tries and finds a weapon
Yeah.
to deal with it, because there is an element of also his paranoia, and it's undoubtable there is an element of paranoia in Peter and the Iron Warriors. So he goes and tries and finds a weapon, but he's also trying to be a good and loyal servant and brother to Horus, because even though he's betrayed the Emperor, he is very, very loyal to Horus, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about, in particular, him. To a lesser extent, lots of the other traits, but in particular, Perturabo. It's this mix of loyalty and betrayal. He's incredibly bitter, and about the Emperor and the Imperium and Dawn, but will unflinching and kind of knows that things are going the same way with Horus, and that this isn't his brother anymore by the time they get to the siege, but still isn't going to break his word.
There's an honour in what he does, and there's a logic which gets him to the point he's at, which is very understandable. And particularly Angel of Exterminators, that there is that point where he's like, I can't break my word again, and I'm stuck with it. Which I think personally as a reader, I felt a connection to that. Until Guy wrote his Primarch's book and and showed me the other side of Perturabo, which is great, which is what these books are supposed to do. That's fantastic. So just tracking back a little bit. So you'd written a handful of books. At what point did you get into that High Lords of Terror meeting? I
think that was not long after then. So Crimson Fist and Grey Angel I'd done, and I think the next job that I was really queued up for was I think the first part of the Talon project, and that was one of the first times that that I was kind of in the room and talking about those ideas and what we could do, and that was I suppose the first sort of like real step across that, and the first sort of piece of work that came out from that time was then Talon Executioner, which was the first novella in what's now bound up in just Talon.
How was it?
And from that, sorry? How was that?
How was it going into that room with the authors there in that style? Obviously, at this point, you'd worked with Forge Road. You'd worked with Alan, as you said, on other projects.
It was pretty nerve-wracking, actually, to be honest. I think I think I gabbled an awful lot in that first meeting. It was also, to be honest, we had a lot of people working on it at that point. It's a lot more compact now, but. We had a lot of people working on it. It was, and I also just remember being exhausted at the end of the day. Right. It was just kind of like, because like 7 hours plus sandwiches of just talking about detailed points or plots or all this kind of stuff. It's pretty tiring. To be honest. So unfortunately, actually, one of my major impressions afterwards was, oh my goodness, am I tired? But yeah, it was great. It was really, really good. And it was the weird thing was at that point I've been sort of like around the peripherals of it. Sure. And I'd already done a bunch of work anyway, and I knew everyone in the room, reasonably well, not as well as I do now, but reasonably well. And from sort of there, it's sort of, and I can't actually, unfortunately, you might be able to tell me better than I can remember the exact kind of stuff. From there, it kind of it exploded a little bit, and there are a lot more short stories. From me after then, covering all kinds of stuff, and I can't remember what order they come in. So, but things like Riven and Keys of Hell, about the Iron Hands. My brief journey into the Iron Hands in the Horus Heresy, which I really enjoyed doing, and I think also then there are a few others kicking around here or then from that kind of period as well, on different topics.
Sure. Do you think? I'm going to guess here that some of the work you were doing with Alan on the Black Books, and I'm not going to go into details, but I can imagine you two had some pretty in-depth conversations about that kind of thing.
We did and we didn't.
Right.
The Riven and Keys of Hell is a good example of where we did. Really, what those are is the idea of the Keys of Hell was very much an Alan idea, an Alan kind of a classic bit of Bly, as we sometimes call it, those of us that knew him, which was he would take things to a very logical but macabre extreme.
Sure.
Which was kind of, if the flesh is weak and they've got the parts of the Iron Hands are obsessed with defeating the weakness of their own flesh, and they've got close ties with technology. Well, where does that end? And what would phrases like cyber resurrection and tech gola and all the rest start to crop up. And then the idea that to twist it, of course, was that Ferrus Manus didn't want his legion to do that, because he was the balance in his legion, which was I think it's expanded on later, but was another Alan tilt on things. Everyone thinks of up to that point as Ferrus Manus as a little bit of a hothead, but actually he was the balancing factor in his legion.
Sure.
And Riven and Keys of Hell are really kind of, I suppose, worked examples of that idea. It sort of expanded out to a story.
That's cool. That's awesome information, because I kind of maybe asked the question the wrong way. I'm more meant. Some people have gone into this writer's room. People like Jim has talked about going in there as an author. He's a solo worker, and then has gone into this environment. You've had, and we talked to. There's a couple of people who've been involved with the kind of army side, book side of things, having a bit of background. But being with Alan, I can imagine you two just sat at home chatting.
Yeah, we did.
Very interesting. And then going into that room where obviously all those people with that wealth of knowledge having those similar kind of discussions, getting really into the finer points. Yeah.
It's I was. I think I was quite. I'm quite lucky, and was quite lucky, and am quite lucky because I get to have. I was kind of steeped in it even then, constantly surrounded by talking about ideas.
That's cool. That's and I think that's reflected or is shown through your work as well. We've got. I mean, you've mentioned so Riven and Keys of Hell are two of my favourite Iron Hand stories because of the nature of what they're dealing with. A bit more, almost more three-dimensional than the Iron Hands get to appear sometimes. And then later on as well, you've covered incidents that are either dubious in their historical kind of nature in lore, or have been. You've offered explanations which shed a very different light on things, and every author does that to a point. I'm not discouraging
that's in some ways kind of like what we. I think that's what we kind of see our jobs as being. It's kind of like you go into you pick up a story, you pick up a book, up a novel, and it's almost one layer behind also the kind of the other sources. It's kind of like, what had you thought of looking at it like this, or there's another way of looking at this faction, this character, what happened at this with these events. That's kind of, I suppose, almost our mission in some ways.
Is there obviously there's an appeal to do that for everyone. Is there a certain part of you that really looks for the say the ending of a novel where something shocking happens? Is there part of you
can't
that
think what you're talking about?
Exactly. Is there part of you that really kind of takes pleasure in knowing that you're really going to shake it up? Like, you get into that story that's got potential to cause some fans to get a bit raucous. Is that in you, or is it just the storytelling?
It is really just the storytelling.
Okay.
I think if I ever have a drive, it's actually sometimes quite similar to Aaron's, which is sometimes just a desire to show a particular thing that hasn't been seen much before. So to highlight something, or to highlight the nature of a legion that has been not given.
So a prime example,
a certain amount of oxygen.
Sure, a prime example of that is the Black Legion books from Aaron, showing it how it would happen in Galaxy, because they've been misconstrued by readers and things like that. Yeah, okay, that's cool.
And another example kind of being the Alpha Legion, which the reason I love writing the Alpha Legion, again, for a bit like the Imperial Fist, for a whole bunch of different kind of reasons, but also it's kind of like part of the reason why I wanted to put them in a novel was because I wanted to show what they're actually like when they're at war. Legion is absolutely fantastic book, and kind of introduces you to this whole kind of secrets and lies, and you don't know which way's coming, and which side they're on, and why, and all the rest. And of course has a huge bombshell spoiler in it, which but what I wanted to do was actually just sort of go, well, this is what the Alpha Legion are like. And a lot of that actually wasn't invention. It was kind of like, well, what would they be like? What does this thing that has been said about their nature, about their psychology, about how they fight campaigns, what would that actually look like? What does that actually mean?
Yeah. Extrapolation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And extrapolation into kind of actual concrete, almost examples.
That's cool. And is an interesting subject, and causes hours of endless debate online, which is always fun.
Of course, which is always fun. But the whole kind of like, I suppose actually another way of putting the question is, do I do just things sometimes to shock? Not really. The moment that you're talking about, at the end of Praetorian of Dawn, because maybe there are still some people out there that aren't aware of it, because I realise actually that I think only the mass market paperback only came out like 14 months or so ago. Sure. So it's maybe some people's first read through that actually came about because primarily of the two things really. One of which was the story. I'd hit a certain point in planning it where I was kind of looking at all the different bits of the jigsaw puzzle and going, okay, how does this resolve? These two people are going to be in a room, as it were, and it's not going to be friendly. And what would happen? What would be the outcome? So I kind of took that question away and came up with an idea and took it to other people and said, I think this is where this story has to go. And I think that then changes the nature of the book, because it becomes a story that actually half of it is leading up to this point. It's a book about it becomes a book about two people dying, effectively. And by that, by the way, I mean an Imperial Fist character and the other character.
Yeah.
Before any conspiracy theory starts, by what I mean. by saying two characters. And the other thing that was in the mix at the same time, the reason why it came out that way was we were looking at a few ways of what the arc was for the Alpha Legion. What is they seemed and how that would play out, and it fitted absolutely perfectly with the momentum shift that they needed at that moment.
Sure.
And so it fitted with kind of the meta plot, and it as soon as I got the go to do it, it just seemed to make complete sense of everything. So it was driven by those things rather than I'll do this to shock, because I think quite often when people set out to if you set out to shock, you don't.
No.
You have to have something else that you're trying to do, another reason, and it just ends up being shocking.
Yeah, it often because the primary goal is to shock, the rest suffers around it, which makes the shock less valuable as well. That's happened many a time in books. You get to the shock and you think, "Oh, I'm really not that bothered." But also,
it splits people. I get Praetorian Dawn is a really interesting book to have written and then get feedback on, because some of the feedback I sometimes hear is this is an Alpha Legion book. I was like, okay, yeah, I can see why people would say that. It's not an Imperial Fist book; it's an Alpha Legion book. Okay, that's fair. I can see that. And then almost 50-50 split. The other feedback I get is this is an Imperial Fist book. It's barely got anything of the Alpha Legion in it.
Yeah.
In almost equal proportions. And I get a fair amount of people who actually the most shocking thing to them is and the thing they feel most actually and they're most engaged with is the death of the Imperial Fist character at the end, rather than the other incident. It's and I count all of those things as successes, because I think if that means that I've written a book, hopefully that means and resonates with people in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good judge of it. And when you're going to write something that is that is impactful, then you're going to have people falling down on each side of that fence as well, and all that comes with that. It's all part of the fun of being a writer, I suppose.
It is.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we'll move on from that subject.
We're just dancing around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because the particular spoiler at the centre.
Again, I suspect 90-odd% of the people know what happens, but for those few, I really hate to spoil what was a moment that got me to reread a section of the book, which is always a good thing as well. You've done a couple of audios, a few audios.
I've done a few audios now. Yeah. Sorry, this is terrible radio, but I'm just going to turn around and look at my shelf behind me where I've got them on. I did War Master, which was the micro audio with Ram and Tikaram playing Horus.
Brilliant.
And
Dark Compliance.
Dark Compliance, which is very much a follow-on about Horus conquering a Mechanicum world in a day.
What's interesting about those two particularly is, War Master is a monologue.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I think for some people might have been a bit daunting to listen to, let alone write. Had you done any audio before doing the Heresy?
The first audio I ever wrote was Grey Angel.
Of course.
And I think War Master was the second one I ever wrote. So not bad going. And Dark Compliance is an interesting one because it was written quite a long time later, but part of the conversation around that was really kind of like, could you take the kind of feel from War Master and expanded out into a full length audio. That's really, I suppose, what the intention is to see Horus kind of from that kind of point of view, with that style, at war, but not just at war, but conquering. That was, as not just someone who can win battles, but can win huge campaigns, and can devastate worlds. That was kind of what I was aiming for.
Was the monologue, was that like first choice? Was the concept of that story?
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because it stands out. I think it's still one of the better audios. It's very. In terms of complexity, it's nothing like Gav having a Titan war going on and screaming babies and stuff like that. But was that something? Obviously, you've not done many audios to have something so stripped back but work.
That's a really good question.
In terms of what you're writing about as well, it's a monologue. It's
I do have that habit.
Sure.
With my editors, I think for a while I had that reputation. By this point, it isn't a reputation; it's just the way I am.
Okay.
Which is we'd talk about an idea, and they would just get this sneaking suspicion that I was about to take it off in a slightly unusual way. It's like, yeah, of course I'll do an audio drama about Horus, but I wanted to be a monologue, or Eagle's Talon, for which is another one of the Horus Heresy audios. I want to do found footage audio, like a found footage audio drama where everything is just told in these kind of intercepted communication snatches. How about that? Why don't we do that? And sometimes I think that they would, that part of them was just going, can't you just do it the normal way, John? And the answer was no. But they all seem to have come out pretty well. And I've always enjoyed doing that, pushing whatever medium it is that I'm working and going, oh, we could do this, or we could tell a story in this way, because it makes people prick up their ears and take interest.
Sure, I suppose any of us within our kind of our sphere are going to set ourselves challenges of some kind, and format, as it were, would be one of yours then, for want of a better term. Okay, no, that's cool. Just wanted to touch on that. So, I mean, we skirted around Talon. First question: do you regret saying 10 million tanks?
I absolutely do regret saying 10 million tanks.
Okay.
I think I said that in the afterword, actually, to the book.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't have said it. It's totally accurate to the research. I tend to research all the things I do for Heresy really thoroughly, and go back over everything that's been written in the past in anything. And I found this figure of 10 million tanks, and it just sort of popped out of my mouth in a seminar. And the problem with it is not because it's inaccurate. It's that then the expectation was set that that's what this story was going to be.
Yeah.
That at one moment there would be 10 million tanks on a world, and that's not what I was going to do.
And to be honest, as a reader, I'm glad, because 10 million tanks means that's a lot of battle to cover, and at some point you read enough about tanks shooting at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Talon, as I say, it's kind of collected now, but we start with, starts all the way back with Black Oculus really leading into it. We've got Siren, Executioner, Witness, Eagle's Talon, Ironclad, and then others have got involved in that as well.
You mentioned Siren as well in there.
What was the original concept? Because we'd heard, I can't remember now, a while ago, we heard a 3-book series. Was that the original concept?
I think 3 kind of blocks of story with
Sure.
the original concept. How exactly it was going to come out was, I don't think was ever kind of locked in at that point.
I think there's always a bit of a. It's weird. At the weekend is you pick bits up, and there's a bit of Chinese whispers goes on as well, and things come out. We had Korak's similar kind of time being told about. It will be this, this, and this, and obviously things change, and you realise that things aren't going to work, and it's a better way of doing it, or what have you.
Exactly. So it's all of the story that I originally envisaged for it is ended up being done.
Right.
There was one trailing bit that was left after Ironclad had come out, which then I put into Siren, which was just this answer of how they got the message. The loyalists got the message off Talon, that then sucked in all of the Imperial forces onto Talon and caused it to become a huge grinding war that went on and on and on. But yeah, it was. There was a couple of format changes in there, but there wasn't any story change really.
That's cool.
It was the story as it comes out with slight. I don't think actually these are spoilers because they're in a bunch of other books. But the fact of the Iron Warriors were there for the Cursus, this god killer weapon, a gate of the gods, path to power, all the different kind of Eldar translations of it that was buried under Talon's surface. No one knew was there. And they were after that. They didn't get it, and the Imperial forces never realised that that's what they were after until 10,000 years later. All of that's kind of set in stone, because that's been in the background of Talon for like 25 years now. Yeah. So those parts of it were set in stone, and a lot of the rest of it was why and how, stories about why and how that the war came about on the surface of Talon, and that is, as it eventually came out, is all there, as we originally talked about it.
It's one of those things we, as readers, we want to know everything. We want to, as heresy fans, we want to absorb everything. Maybe that tagline will be used again on a Forge World book one day, which is it's probably more where it sits.
Well, maybe, yeah. It's certainly a different thing that we do when we go into the novels than you do when you go into like the Forge World Black books. They have a different tone, and they do a different thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but I could certainly see, fingers crossed, touch wood, down the line we get a Talon book, and it's huge maps of tank formations moving and all that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
As you say, unfortunately, in a novel, doesn't necessarily make for as interesting reading.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't want to go into every single story. We've Praetorian Dawn. We've probably covered that.
We probably covered it a bit.
I think we probably covered it.
Alpha Legion and Imperial Fists in the solar system. That was that's it, more or less.
Craziness ensues in there. Slave to Darkness was your latest full novel to come out.
Yep.
Four major kind of arcs with multiple characters with each arc. Important characters as well.
You're nice and simple, just like everything else that I do. It's kind of 4 arcs, big characters, and I suppose those arcs are the Iron Warriors, Perturabo, and a bunch of, but told through the eyes of Space Marines around him, Lorgar, and Zardu Layak. Zardu Layak being a character that first appeared actually in the Forge World books, and has a gorgeous miniature, getting his first run out in a novel. The Sons of Horus, looming large in that, but also an awful lot about Malagast and some of the other Sons of Horus characters.
Yeah, because most of the Primarchs are kind of pushed to the sides at various points. We're almost on these kind of lieutenant kind of characters, within it, and that allows kind of a bit of space. Was it really difficult to kind of pick out the characters and how they were going to, and I suppose as well, talking earlier about having, earlier on, you didn't, writing a short story like Crimson Fist, you didn't have to converse with many people. This took lines from people like Guy, direct lines from his books, leading on to kind of the reasonings behind what some of the stuff that happens on Terra. So we lots of emails shot off and messages and
it was a complex book. It was a complex book to write, but some of it, and you mentioned picking out the characters. Malagast was always going to be there, and Guy was a huge help with that. A lot of how Malagast is in Slaves to Darkness was kind of almost a continuity and inspired from Guy's story, The Twisted, which is in one of the compilations. I can't remember which, I'm afraid, but is a great story, all about Malagast. Then there's callbacks. It's one of those. It was one of those books that I knew when I was writing it, and I think lots of people have picked up on where it touches on lots and lots of other books throughout the series, or characters or consequences from lots of other books throughout the series, from First Heretic, from Betrayer, from Angel Exterminatus, from Talon, from Horus Rising and False Gods and Galaxy in Flames. Oh goodness, you go on, Fulgrim, the book Fulgrim, layers upon layers of it. It took quite a lot of unraveling and digging to make sure that there was a great story in there as well.
Sure.
Hopefully a great story.
And I spoke to you very briefly while you were writing this and got a sense of that. And I suppose when you're writing tie-in fiction, you're always going to have an element of that. But when you're writing, book 50 whatever of a huge series, that's magnified.
I've got a feeling it's probably the biggest work of fiction ever, continuous work of shared universe fiction ever written, sci-fi, fantasy or not. I don't know that, but I've got a suspicion that at over 50 books we've probably got that. Because this was one of the there are kind of almost a series of books, Wolfsbane, this book, and the Titan Death to an extent, but also Jim's last book, Death Guard book,
Dagger,
the Buried Dagger.
Buried Dagger, that's the
which are almost kind of like these books that are the last stepping stones to the Siege of Terra. So they all had to do. They had to be great stories, but they also had to do a bunch of work at the same time.
Sure.
Of tying off plot lines, or bringing, not even tying off, but almost bringing the plot lines in, and then showing where their momentum was carrying them in relation to the Siege of Terra.
Okay, cool. I think we're kind of getting to the end. There is one question. I asked this to Dan and he asked me to ask everyone else. So, was
Good
there
reply.
was there a heresy story that you wish you could have been the one to have written? Not like rewrite someone's book, but was there a story that you would have wanted to tell if you had been given ultimate choice?
You know what? Not really.
Okay.
I am very, very lucky. I have got to do all the particular things that I wanted to do in the heresy and some more. Talon was always something that appealed to me. It was I can remember reading the background on it in the second edition Imperial Guard Codex a very long time ago.
Yes.
I always, once I'd started in on this process, I really wanted to do the book that became Praetorian of Dawn. That idea sloshed around in my head for a very, very long time. In honesty, I didn't think I was going to be the person to write Slaves to Darkness, but I got to do it, and it was an awful lot of fun. So no, I don't think there's anything. There's another bit that I would have preferred to have done to the ones I've done.
Okay, that's cool. That's all good. Okay, well, I mean, we'll leave kind of what you've done here, and you've got some stuff coming out. So you've got your first part of the Siege.
Yep, I am talking about getting to do all the stuff that you wanted to do. I've got to write the first Siege of Terror book.
No pressure.
Well, it's not any pressure anymore because it's done.
Yeah, true.
But it was a huge amount of pressure. But is called The Solar War. And those of you who were any listeners who were lucky enough to hopefully come along to the Weekender hopefully heard me talk a bit about it at that. But yes, more and on. Watch this space.
Excellent. And in the 40k setting, as it were, any more?
I have got undoubtedly the third book in the Heresian Wars series, which is all about Inquisitor Covenant, to do to tie off that trilogy. That third book's probably going to be called Abomination, and will it's almost certain it'll end really well for all of the protagonists.
Wouldn't be 40k otherwise, would it?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm working on some other audio dramas and things like that. For if people have listened to Agent of the Throne, I'm doing some more of those audio dramas about what it's like to be at the sort of street level sharp end of working for the Inquisition. Excellent.
And it's great to see books like Heresian Wars and Agents delving back into that. I think as a fan of the novels from way back when they started, I think it's amazing that new readers can get in on new books that are covering the kind of stories that we used to read about back then as well. Yeah, and things like Carrion and Throne as well by Chris. Yeah. Got to give a shout out to that as well. Great book as well if people enjoy reading about the Inquisition. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to impart upon us before we finish? No, just thanks very much for having me on. Oh, thanks very much for coming on and divulging some of your information. And always a pleasure. Excellent. Cheers. And we make it to the end of another episode of The Imperial Truth. We have a couple of things to talk about. First off, you may have noticed, Neil, you started posting stuff on Facebook and places, old pictures, old pictures.
Old pictures, yeah, I tried to.
Yeah, I think it's probably just kind of worth saying that if you are, if you don't use Instagram, so you're at Neil Paints on Instagram, but you're at Neil Paints on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
you put up some pictures of your old Golden Demon winners.
Yeah, I was talking to someone a while ago, and I can't remember who it was, and I just mentioned about my my first one I won, which was the Terminators, which I put up, and it was funny how they turned around to me and said, "Oh, I don't think I've seen that." But for me, because I've posted about these things so many times, I was very much in the mind of, well, everyone's seen it.
Yeah.
But of course, you forget that obviously new people come to the hobby, or new people find out about you, and then they don't know about
these things.
Stuff from 2009.
Yeah, well, even don't know about stuff from 3 years ago. Pictures are new stuff's being added so quickly that stuff gets taken out of the cycle, and all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, where did that picture come from? I was like, oh, that's 4 years old, a Golden Demon winner. And it's like, oh wow, that sounds so cool, because they've never seen it before, because there's so much content. So if you do want to go and look at some of the stuff Neil has painted in the past, when he used to win stuff, then then you can go and follow him either on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Instagram's the best, isn't it? But you have started using
Instagram is my favourite, and I must admit, obviously what I've managed to do now is get Instagram to auto then post it up to Facebook. So I thought, oh, that's quite easy. That's not difficult for me to do now. But what that has meant is that I posted that up, and I think you sent me a message, or you said put on there, don't forget to share it.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, right, yeah, I'll share it. So I shared it, and that didn't work.
No,
apparently people couldn't see the images. So I thought, oh, right, I need to learn how to do this properly.
Yeah,
but Instagram is my main one.
Yeah, and I'll try and reshare it on the podcast page as well. But and that's what I wanted to do. But it's cool. It's cool stuff to go and look at and see what Neil's up to. It's really good. Moving on, we have had some interesting news. So the London Grand Tournament, which I ran this year, the Heresy 4, is it's coming back next year, 2019. It's moving date to September. I am not involved with it this year. There are various reasons for that, and I think I talked a little bit about on the show about why, but I felt I couldn't do it justice if I took it on as much as anything else. But Pete from Pete Cook, who runs some of the Brighton events and what have you, has taken it on. So there is going to be Heresy this year at the LGT that's taking place. They've moved venue to the Lee Valley Sports Centre in North London, I believe. It's interesting. Its times and everything else may not work for me, but I hope to try and pop up at least. It would be a shame not to playing it, bearing in mind it's third closest Heresy event, so it's only an hour and 40 odd minutes away. But I could potentially do that and come home that night rather than getting a hotel. So it makes it desirable in that respect. But if you want more information, you can go and check out London Grand Tournament on Facebook and Twitter or wherever, and a website, and they'll have more information there. I know Pete's trying to kind of get stuff organised in terms of terrain and extra terrain and stuff that affects other tables, and it'll be interesting to see fully how that goes. And let's hope it's a success, and all the best on that one. And in addition to that, I did put up a picture. There is going to be an event in August over the bank holiday weekend in Cardiff. And that's all the information I have so far. Dallon Prime, I think it's pronounced. I wrote it. I haven't worked out how it's pronounced yet. I am busily working on a pack, which I hope not necessarily kind of groundbreaking, but is different from what I've normally done. And for the UK, trying to step it on a gear. We'll see how that goes. Got a few ideas, and really hoping that this is the year that I do take it a step further. But so you can pencil that one in for the bank holiday weekend in Cardiff. And if you are European, Cardiff has an airport. It's or if you're far away, say Scotland or wherever, and you want to travel down, say Cardiff does have an airport, so you can fly in. And the beauty of Cardiff, as we've mentioned many times before, is the venue is 5 minutes walk from the train station, 10 minutes walk from the very centre of town, and there are a shed load of hotels, of B&Bs, and you've got loads of options for Airbnb as well. Cardiff's great in that everything's within 20 minutes walk, like everything. So, yeah, hoping that will be really cool. And I will provide more details as and when they become available. Basically, I don't want to feed out too much until I've got the pack pretty much done so that people know what they're getting into. But tickets will go on sale with plenty of time and everything else. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It'll be good to go back to Cardiff. I love Cardiff as a place to.
You do love Cardiff, and I must admit, Cardiff is cool.
I've had a number of people going, Cardiff, yeah, sorted, because it is like that. So yes, keep an eye on that one. Okay, we did mention some competitions earlier in the show. We have two. One is for a £10 Element Games voucher, and we're going to give this one away to someone who comments on either Facebook post for this show, the Twitter, because that gets linked to Twitter, so who replies to the Twitter post about this show, and I will also make an Instagram post about this show on @ChildOfFang, and you can comment on any or all three of those, and we will pick a winner from those, and that will get you a £10 Element Games voucher. So that one's nice and simple. We will draw that one. In fact, I'm going to do that one quite quickly. We will draw that when we record for the next episode, so before the end of the year. So you have to be quite quick on that one. The second thing we're going to give away is a limited edition copy of Vulcan, the Primarch's novel. And this came from Tony, who's a listener mainly of After Eleanor, but a really great guy from out west in the US. Big thank you to him for giving me that to give away on the show. Crazy. And to do that, to win that one, what you'll have to do is email contest@theimperialtruth.com. That's contest@theimperialtruth.com, and include one hope for the heresy in 2019. So one thing you're wishing for, whether it's a model, whether it's rules, whether it's campaign system, whether it's an event, what have you. The one thing I will not accept, because we're not getting into this, is don't bother to tell me that I wish Heresy went 8th edition. That's not something we're going to open up. So anything apart from that, apart from a change in rule set, then it is fair game. But if you email contest@theimperialtruth.com with your answers, and we'll select one from that, and we'll let that one run over to January. But we'll give it a firm date on that one a little bit later. But that's that done. We've already given out your Instagram and everything else. I'm @ChildOfFang.
Indeed.
On various places, @Imperial_Truth for Twitter. Go and check out the Facebook group. As I said, we've got that poll going up, which will finish very soon, that Rob's been handling. And there's been some interesting chat. Put a question out there recently on Facebook about third party. What are your favourite third party pieces to use for heresy? So if you've not seen that and you've got some ideas, go and feed them in there, because I'm interested, as well as other people as well. And you can always email for any questions or comments or what have you to greg@theimperialtruth.com or neil@theimperialtruth.com. Still having a bit of trouble with your email, aren't we? But
yes, I am indeed. Yeah,
we can
hold off on the email, people.
yeah. If you want to direct them to me for Neil, that's fine. We might have to just set Neil up with a different one, but we'll sort that. We'll sort that over the Christmas time, hopefully.
Neil Pates.
Yeah. It might even be that. So come back to us. I'll try and tweet if we do. But you can give us feedback. Again, I had another couple of people who've really been digging the author interviews. So massive thank you. Again, I've been really enjoying them. I think they're quite eye-opening at times. And hopefully you've enjoyed John. Again, in fact, tomorrow I've got the next I'm doing another interview, a transatlantic interview. So a little hint there of who it could be. And they've got some more to organise going forwards as well. So that's all exciting stuff. But I don't think we've got anything. Again, so T-shirts are still available. I have another T-shirt being worked on. I've got a friend who's who sketches a lot of stuff, who I've got hopefully working on another T-shirt design, so we can get them out. Patreon, if you think the show's worth anything. If you don't, that's fine. I'm possibly with you on that one. But if you are and you want to head over to Patreon, you can support us via Patreon. It's all gratefully received. iTunes reviews. I looked. We've got. I think it's probably about average for the amount of kind of listens we get, but we haven't had any iTunes reviews in a while. So particularly if you're new or if you haven't left one, iTunes reviews are really helpful, and that would be amazing. But yeah, that'll be all. I won't bug you for any more kind of stuff. I think I've done enough, and you'll give your ears a rest. So I'm done, unless you've got anything to add, Neil.
Nothing from me.
Awesome. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.